So I think entrepreneurship fundamentally is an expression of the Imago Dei. It's an expression of God's image in us, and that we were created to create. We were created to work. It's part of sharing in God's image. And that's fundamentally the way that I understand entrepreneurship. To me, it's value creation. It's not about who is running a business that is taking risks. It's not entrepreneurship narrowly defined in that way. It's about coming into any area of culture, any area of business, any area of ministry with a certain spirit, what Peter Drucker referred to as a manifesto of dissent. That something that could be different, and in being different it could be better. So you can see how entrepreneurship understood that way is ministry. It's about carrying that kind of spirit, that kind of manifesto, a gift set that relates to that, to whatever God's work is in the world. And the church is diminished when we don't understand entrepreneurship that way and value it that way and help foster it and see it as vitally connected to the mission and the ministry that Christians should have in the world. So Christian entrepreneurship reflects the spirit. First of all, it operates out of a reservoir of gratitude. Gratitude for the ability to see a problem and envision how it might be fixed. To see something that's working and envision how it might work better. Ultimately, out of the paradigm of what drives, what animates the free market, which is how, as a producer of goods and services, how can I serve others, serve customers better than anybody else? That's the core driver in the marketplace that makes the marketplace work so much better than command-centered economies. So the entrepreneur is a key player in that, of course, because the entrepreneur is the one who's envisioning how things can be done better. I think all the time of my favorite Christian entrepreneur. As Guinness speaks a lot about him. That's how I was introduced to the actual story of Arthur Guinness, who's the founder of Guinness beer. And you might be surprised to know that story is rooted in the story of a Christian entrepreneur. The full story is told by New York Times bestselling author Stephen Mansfield in a book called God and Guinness. Amazing to see how he saw in his case, a cultural problem primarily that was leading to all kinds of other deficits that as an entrepreneur he felt he might be able to help remedy. So Guinness to me is a sort of a paradigmatic figure of the archetypal entrepreneur. I mean, you have these different images of entrepreneurs that are prevalent in the culture. You have the Gordon Gekko, greedy Wall Street type persona, right, captured in film, and you have the entrepreneur as a bad player who is getting rich on the backs of others. That's envisioned by some. But on the other side of the spectrum, you have this view of the entrepreneur as not the kind of rationalist superhero of Ayn Rand fame, but rather as this unique steward of the creative power in economy and in culture that makes the world better for everyone that those entrepreneurs touch. And that is, if we don't see that like calling and gifting themselves as beautiful ground upon which to talk about the Imago Dei, the unique way in which the human spirit is created and operates in the world as a part of Christian witness, we miss all kinds of opportunities. The entrepreneur that I see that carries the mission of the church into society, into economy, into culture, is one who fundamentally sees their leadership role in the context of an inverted pyramid. The traditional pyramid is one at which the leader of the enterprise sits on top of the pyramid. The Christian view of leadership, inspired by the example of Christ himself, right, flips that pyramid and puts the leader at the bottom of the pyramid. He or she exists to serve those in the organization, and to be the servant leader. And so everything that animates the entrepreneur and culture, when I think about the entrepreneurs who inspire me, operates from that inverted pyramid perspective. That's at the heart of what makes for successful entrepreneurs. It's also, by the way, at the heart of what makes for successful companies. There are those who understand how to serve all of their stakeholders in a way that puts their interests ahead of one's own. I believe that Christians need the church to grow up, meaning that the life of faith is meant to be lived in community. And there is something about being in community that helps us grow in the life of faith in ways that are unique. And if you think about the community of the church and what it is supposed to be as a loaf of bread, and you think about the different ingredients that are required to make that loaf of bread rise, if you will, to all that it should be, the entrepreneurial spirit is, to me, a leaven in the loaf. It helps the bread to rise to what it should be. And I mean that because the entrepreneur can see what others cannot see. It can see what might be when others have no vision for that. So when the scriptures say, without a vision, the people perish, I think in part it's saying that you need those that are ingredients in the loaf, as it were, that that change the action, the results of what the bread becomes. And the entrepreneurial spirit is a sort of disruptive one. It does not allow the status quo just to remain the status quo. Why don't we have a food pantry to help the poor in our community? Why aren't we thinking about engaging with people in meaningful, regular dialogue in the coffee shops where they are? Why aren't we considering how this product might be made in a way that hires this community of people in a community, the workplace community itself being, if you will, an opportunity for the church to be a little church, just as families are opportunities to be a little church. Why are those things not yet, which could or ought to be? That's the leaven in the loaf that the entrepreneurial spirit represents in the local body of Christ.
Calling for those who are indeed called to that vocation. And in fact, it's necessary for the coordination of society in a world that in which we want to fulfill the cultural mandate, to be productive, to be fruitful, multiply. It requires production. It also requires being productive enough to sustain a growing population. That requires participating in the division of labor and accumulation of capital. These are all things that economic theory tells us. It also tells us that economic goods are scarce, and these goods can easily be squandered and wasted if they are used in doing and producing things that nobody wants. That's where the entrepreneur comes in. The entrepreneur is the one who undertakes production. He's the one who obtains scarce factors of production and directs them towards a particular use. Now, those entrepreneurs who undertake production are doing that because they want to earn a profit. They want to earn positive returns on their investment. But in a market economy, The only way they can do that is by serving other people. In other words, doing what other people want them to do. And if there was not entrepreneurship, we'd have to try to make these decisions in some other way through a central planning agency, a central planning board. And when that happens, the state or the central planner owns all of the means of production. They don't have a market price system that they can use to calculate profit and loss, so they have no rational way to decide what should we produce, how should we produce it, for whom should we produce it, and it descends in economic chaos. And so that's why the entrepreneur is vitally important for all of that divergent economic activity to be coordinated in a way that reduces as much as possible the squandering of scarce resources. And in that way, the entrepreneur serves a very noble function and calling in serving as a stewardship of the resources that God has provided. Okay, one thing that the church can do is that would help facilitate a properly functioning entrepreneurial culture, I would say, just teach sound Christian ethics. Teach God's moral law. That does a couple of things. You'd be more likely to have a society that understands the virtue of private property, and that is an institutional framework that's absolutely necessary for entrepreneurs to do what they need to do, which is coordinate economic activity. Because only in an environment of private property do we have voluntary exchange, and so the market prices, the prices of all of the factors of production and the prices of the products, those prices are all determined through voluntary exchange and are reflective of people's subjective preferences. And so the prices that entrepreneurs use to calculate profit and loss are going to actually be reflective of what society wants. And that will make it more likely, when they act to earn a profit, that makes it more likely they're going to actually serve their customers and not squander scarce resources. On top of that, of course, if you teach Christian ethics soundly from the pulpit, it'll be less likely that entrepreneurs will be led astray through the sins of their own flesh, through the temptation from the devil or from the world to commit fraud, to not be fully honest, to not be integrable. All those things, I think, help maintain a thriving entrepreneurial culture in a way that allows entrepreneurial activity to be glorifying to God.